Ever wondered who was the first man to utter the catchphrase, lights, camera, action? He has been called the father of film technique, the man who invented Hollywood and the Shakespeare of the screen. He is one of the premier pioneering American film director. He is David Llewellyn Wark Griffith, or simply known as D.W. Griffith. Griffith was born January 22, 1875 in Crestwood, Kentucky. Griffith began his creative career as a playwright but met with little success. Only one of his plays was accepted for a performance. Then he decided to become an actor and appeared in many plays as an extra. In 1907, Griffith, still writing as a playwright, went to New York and attempted to sell a script to Edison Studios. Edison Studios was an American motion picture production company owned by the Edison Company of inventor Thomas Edison. Edison himself played no direct part in the making of his studio's films beyond being the owner. The first commercially exhibited motion pictures in the United States were from Edison and premiered at a kinetoscope parlor in New York City on April 14, 1894. The program consisted of 10 short films, each less than a minute long, of athletes, dancers, and other performers. Some of the studio's notable productions include The Kiss, 1896, The Great Train Robbery, 1903, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, 1910, the first Frankenstein film in 1910, and the first ever serial made in 1912 titled What Happened to Mary, and The Land Beyond the Sunset, 1912, which film historian William K. Everson considered the screen's first genuinely lyrical film. The company also produced a number of short kinetophone sound films in 1913. The studio made close to 1,200 films until the studio's closing in 1918. Of that number, 54 were feature-length. Edison studio producer Edwin Porter rejected Griffith's script but gave him an acting part in Rescued from an Eagle's Nest. Finding the world of film interesting, Griffith decided to explore the motion picture business. In 1908, Griffith accepted an acting job for the American Motoscope and Biograph Company, commonly known as Biograph in New York City. At Biograph, Griffith's career in the film industry would change forever. In 1908, Biograph's main director, Wallace McCutcheon, grew ill, and his son, Wallace McCutcheon Jr., took his place. McCutcheon Jr., however, was not able to bring the studio success. As a result, the Biograph head, Henry Marvin, decided to give Griffith the position, and the young man made his first movie for the company, The Adventures of Dolly. By 1909, he was turning out 2 to 3 films per week. Over the course of the following 5 years, Griffith directed over 450 short films, experimenting with the storytelling techniques under the Biograph Company. Like every other director of that era, Griffith wrestled with the problem of narrative, how to tell a story in a silent medium. Griffith seemed to understand from the outset that film presented its own unique set of problems and opportunities. By composing his actors within the frame, by relying on revealing actions rather than words, and especially by juxtaposing images and events through editing, Griffith was able to create within his audience an emotional involvement in his stories. One of the 5 Griffith films preserved in the National Film Registry, A Corner in Wheat, is praised for creating a masterful composition, lone figures confined to the corner of the screen, overwhelmed by empty vistas, conveying through image alone the desperation the characters feel. In his film, The Country Doctor opens with a panning shot with its technical sophistication. starting with a long shot of a valley, then panning to a house on a hill to focus on a family already emerging to walk forward until they stand in medium shot. Griffith establishes with a single uninterrupted camera movement both the story setting and the identity and socio-economic status of its characters. The sort of camera shot we take for granted now, but which pretty much didn't exist before him. That only a year into his career as a director, he concluded the tragic story with a mirror of that opening shot, panning from the now empty house as the film ends to that same long shot of the valley, underscores just how quickly he raced ahead of his competitors in using film to convey emotion. Griffith did not invent cross-cutting, but he took it farther than anyone before him, using it to create a narrative flow and a sense of anticipation that was sorely lacking in early movies. In the thriller The Lonely Villa, thieves break into a secluded country home and terrorize a woman and her children while her husband and the police race to their rescue. Griffith cuts back and forth between 3 points of view to create genuine suspense, an editing technique still used to this day. Griffith continued to develop new approaches to film storytelling throughout his career at Biograph. For example, in 1911's two-part short Enoch Arden, a wife stands on the shore waiting for her husband's return from the sea, while at that moment the husband is shipwrecked and washed ashore on a tropic island. Griffith uses cutting not just to show the same action from different points of view as in The Lonely Villa, or even to establish that the action is simultaneous, but to show parallel storylines linked only by the emotional resonance between them. Griffith cuts back and forth between the two storylines, the shipwrecked sailor, the wife who waits, for the remainder of the film, showing the analog's plights of the castaway and his presumed widow as they each struggle to survive. In The Musketeers of Pig Alley, 1912, which is credited for being the first gangster movie, the film is remarkable for another startling leap in film technique, in this case, the likely invention of what is now called follow focus. In 1914, Griffith made his first feature-length film. Judith of Bethulia features an early example of what is known as classical continuity editing, or classical Hollywood narrative, the practice of cutting within a scene to make clear to the viewer at all times where the characters are in relationship to each other and to their surroundings, both in terms of physical space and the chronology of the film's story. The use of classical continuity editing became the industry standard by 1917, but its use in Judith of Bethulia was very advanced for its day. He produced and directed the Biograph film Judith of Bethulia. At that time, Biograph believed that longer features were not viable. According to actress Lillian Gish, Biograph thought that a movie that long would hurt the audience's eyes. Because of company resistance to his goals and his cost overruns on the film that cost $30,000 to produce, Griffith left Biograph. He took his stock company of actors with him and joined the Mutual Film Corporation. He formed a studio with the majestic studio manager Harry Aitken. It became known as Reliance Majestic Studios and was later renamed Fine Arts Studio. In 1915, through Reliance Majestic Studios, Griffith produced The Birth of a Nation. It is based on the novel and play The Clansman, both by Thomas Dixon. The film was a commercial success, but was highly controversial owing to its portrayal of African American men, played by white actors in blackface, as unintelligent and sexually aggressive towards white women. After the 1915 release of The Birth of a Nation, riots broke out in several black neighborhoods across the country. Ironically, the release of The Birth of a Nation inspired many African Americans to start making their own films in an attempt to counter the film's depiction of them and to offer positive alternative images and stories of the African American people. The Birth of a Nation is generally considered as the birth of modern American cinema and was the first motion picture to be shown at the White House. There were widespread protests against The Birth of a Nation, and it was banned in several cities. The outcry of racism was so great that Griffith was inspired to produce Intolerance, Love's Struggle Throughout the Ages the following year, in which he invented false eyelashes for the said film. Griffith wanted Sina Owen, who plays Atarea, the princess beloved in the film's Babylonian segment, with lashes luxurious enough to brush her cheeks when she blinked. In collaboration with a wig maker who did the actual fabricating, the solution Griffith is credited with involved weaving human hair through a fine strip of gauze, creating false eyelashes. Several filming innovations belong solely to Griffith, some of which he invented during his collaboration with the G.W. Bitzer at the Biographico. They include the flashback, the iris shot, the mask, the systematic use of the soft focus shot, and the split screen. In the years following Birth of a Nation, Griffith never again saw the same monumental success as his signature film, and, in 1931, his increasing failures forced his retirement. Though hailed for his vision in narrative filmmaking, he was similarly criticized for his blatant racism. Griffith died in Los Angeles in 1948, one of the most dichotomous figures in film history. And in 1953, the Directors Guild of America instituted the D.W. Griffith Award, its highest honor. He was voted the 15th greatest director of all time by Entertainment Weekly in 1996. Truly, D.W. Griffith's place as an important filmmaker cannot be denied.